Alright, it's my turn. The bigwig always has to go last, right? And so, I prepared something special for you, Big Sis Yoko. You've heard of the 7 mysteries, right? They're all the rage at our school right now. But this isn't about the 7 school mysteries. These are from this area. Kind of like local legends, I guess. Which are you interested in? The public hall where the ghost always appears. I thought you'd pick that one. You probably saw it when you got here, but that hall is unexpectedly rather new. It was built just a few years ago, but still, it's already haunted. Apparently, it's already considered a ghost spot, and people come from all around to see it. But where do you think that ghost appears? Near the rubbish disposal chute. That's right, near the rubbish disposal chute. And you don't hear about many ghosts who appear in a place like that. But apparently it's there, and although you can't see it, you can hear it crying. I have a friend by the name of Kiryu. He went to see the ghost for himself, and at the public hall, they have a rubbish disposal chute on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors. Apparently, the voice comes from the 4th floor, and one evening, when there weren't many people around, Kiryu went to see for himself. Orange rays of light filtered into the hall through the windows, and his footsteps creaked as he walked, meaning even he was creeped out, even though normally nothing ever got to him. He stood before the chute and took a deep breath. Then he held his breath so as not to make any unnecessary noise, and he placed his ear to it. At first, he didn't know what he was hearing, but then... Sob, 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 sob. It was faint, but he could definitely hear someone crying. And then, a faint figure appeared. The rumors weren't quite true. They said you couldn't see anything, but Kiryu did. He wanted to run, but couldn't, so instead he just gulped. And then, what do you know? The figure pointed towards the chute. The figure seemed to be asking for something related to it. Big Sis Yoko, what would you do in this situation? I don't think it was anything inside. You think just like Kiryu. He also thought it was pointless to look inside. Like, if there was anything in there, it would have already fallen down. And so, he decided to visit the garbage collection point on the 1st floor. There, he found piles of all sorts of stuff. He didn't really know what the figure wanted to say, but then he heard a faint voice. Doll. The doll. He could hear it coming from the chute exit. It seemed to be talking about a doll. And, for sure, he could see something that looked like a doll by the chute exit. He moved closer to it, and it was indeed a doll, roughly 30 centimeters long, the type a small girl might hold. That was no doubt what the figure wanted. As he bent down to pick it up, he heard a sound coming from the chute exit. Eh? Did you say something? The person up above was clearly trying to say something again, he thought. And so, he tried to stick his head in the chute. But there was a loud noise, and a block of concrete fell right in front of him. If his timing had been just a little different, it would have collided with his head. He fell back and then heard a cold voice by his ear. Damn, I missed. It was the same voice as before, but now it was filled with malice and hatred. He heard a child's shrill laughter, so he rushed back to the 4th floor, but the figure was now gone. Why did she try to kill Kiryu? I asked him myself, but he didn't know. People never saw the figure again after that, but they did hear the crying voice. That's why she'll probably appear again someday. And that's the story of the ghost that appears at the public hall. Is there another of the 7 mysteries that you'd like to hear? Yes. Okay, which would you like to hear? The real human-faced dog. That's right. There was a bit of a fuss about the human-faced dog a while back, yeah? A dog with a human face really is rare, after all, so it's pretty natural the story would spread all over Japan. Around 5 p.m, an average-sized dog appeared near the rubbish bin in a park. When someone approached it to give it some food, it turned around and had the face of a human man. But there's no way a creature like that could exist. Even if a person married a dog, it's not like they could have a kid. Still, my friend Ohara believed the story. What an idiot, right? He took some dog food to the park and wandered around during the evening. I told him several times to stop. One day, Ohara didn't come to school, so I went to his house after to give him some printouts. He looked to be in great pain. His face was bright red and he struggled to breathe. I guess he also had a fever. The human-faced dog. I have to find it. My grandma, he said, tears filling his eyes. I asked him what was going on, and he said his grandmother was sick, but even the doctors didn't know what was wrong with her. At any rate, she was sick in bed, so they asked a powerful monk to take a look at her. He said it was the work of an evil spirit, but if they sacrificed a dog, then she would get better. Do you really believe that? I asked before I could stop myself. I do, but a normal dog didn't work, so maybe a human-faced one will, Ohara said with a straight face. Yoshio nodded, as though he understood, but he didn't seem to realize the importance of what he said. A normal dog didn't work meant that they had already tried, right? This Ohara-kun kid seemed to have lost his mind. Why didn't Yoshio realize that? Was he stupid? Instead of calling him Yoshio, maybe it would have been better to call him Stupido. Or maybe Yoshio. Paid no attention to me as I thought that and continued with his story. That night, we got a call from Ohara's mother saying that he'd disappeared. He'd no doubt gone out looking for the human-faced dog, so he was probably at that same park. I left the house quietly so my mother didn't notice. Don't look at me with that scary look on your face, Mum. I had a good reason for it. And in the dark park, there was Ohara. What the hell are you doing? You're sick and your mother's worried. But he was just standing there, not doing anything. I thought maybe it was because of his fever, but that wasn't it. You see, he was muttering something. I saw the human-faced dog. I saw the human-faced dog. Hey, you've just got a fever and it's making you see strange things. Come on, let's go home. I grabbed his arm, but he shook me off. Then he ran off, screaming. He was so fast I couldn't even chase after him. The next day, he didn't come to school again. His mother contacted everyone she could, but nobody knew where he was. That evening, I went back to the park again. As I was looking around, a nearby tree rustled. Ohara! But a dog appeared. When our eyes met, I thought my heart was going to jump out of my throat. I mean, that dog had Ohara's face. He looked at me like he was about to cry, and thinking he might speak, I turned and ran off. After that, people started talking about how a human-faced dog appeared in that area. It would stare at you like it wanted to say something. I think it was probably Ohara, but I don't know what happened to him. And that's the story of the human-faced dog. Is there another of the 7 mysteries that you'd like to hear? Yes. Okay, which would you like to hear? The strange old lady in the dress, Pink-san. Pink-san, huh? This story's a special one. You see, Pink-san actually exists. She's nothing like the stories of Kuchisake Onna or whatever. I've actually seen her. Like, when it's time to go home from school, she hangs around near the school gate. She wears a pink frilly dress made of sparkling material, like the ones you can find on dolls that girls play with. And she also carries a pink umbrella with white polka dots on it. And she wears a huge pink ribbon on her head as well. It's crazy. And when she finds a student going home by themselves, she approaches them to ask a question. "Do you want a gem?" she asks. If you say yes, then she asks what type of gem do you want. But you have to give her the right answer, otherwise she kills you. If you do give her the right answer, then she actually gives you the gem though. Ah, Big Sis Yoko, what's with that face? You don't believe me? She's probably just an old lady who likes flashy things. How can you say that when you've never even seen her? Pink-san is real. There was this girl by the name of Katayama in the next town over, and she went to our school until the 2nd grade. Her big brother actually ran into Pink-san when he was in elementary school. It was a cloudy, gloomy day, and because he had weekly duty, it was late when he finally left through the school gates. Then he heard a hoarse voice right behind him. "Do you want a gem?" He turned around and Pink-san was suddenly right there. Even though everyone knew the rumors, she had never actually spoken to anyone before. So he was surprised, and before he was able to think carefully, he answered, "Yes, I do." Pink-san gave him a creepy grin. "Is that so? Well then, what type of gem do you want?" There are all sorts of gems, right? I don't really know much about them, but Big Sis Yoko, what type of gem do you like? Diamonds. Huh, what a coincidence. That was how Katayama's big brother answered too. Then Pink-san grinned. I see. They say those who possess diamonds will be rich and successful. Well then, come with me. She beckoned him to come closer. Katayama's brother followed her on shaky legs to an old house. She led him to a drawing room and made him sit before a low table. Scared, he wondered what was about to happen when she placed a small bag in front of him. Open it, she said. And so he did. Inside was 5 or 6 diamonds, about 1 centimeter in diameter. With that alone, he'd be able to spend the rest of his life doing whatever he wanted, he couldn't help but think. I mean, all people just want to have fun, right? That's not true. Huh? Look at you, trying to be cool. Of course everyone thinks that way. That was how he felt too. And so, he suddenly grabbed the bag and stood up. What are you doing? I haven't said I'm going to give it to you yet. He suddenly shoved Pink-san, who was kneeling next to him, as hard as he could. She fell and hit her head on the corner of the table. There was a terrible, heavy sound. The corner of the table was covered in blood, and as Pink-san fell to the floor, she then stopped moving. Was she dead? As he moved to look at her, he heard an almost whistling sound. Then, Pink-san started to melt away. It happened so fast, like ice cream melting in a microwave. Ah! Katayama's brother was so scared that he ran away. As he ran out of Pink-san's house, he bumped into someone. It was a grown-up in a suit he didn't know. Hey, look out! Help me! He looked up, and a kind-looking face started to melt before him. Yeah! He shook them off and ran again. No idea what was going on. Was that guy Pink-san's friend? As he kept thinking about it, he finally reached home. He opened the door, about ready to collapse, and his mother in the kitchen turned to look at him in surprise. Hey, don't be so reckless. But at that voice, he jumped up. What would he do if his mother's face also started melting like that man before, he thought. Big sis Yoko, do you think such a thing is even possible? No. Huh, I see. Just like Katayama's brother then. He summoned up all his courage and looked at his mother. There was nothing strange about her face. It looked the same as always. Relieved, all the tension drained from his body. He'd broken out in a sweat all over. As he calmed down, he saw his mother had a fed-up look on her face. What? Did you run all the way home from school? You're covered in sweat. Go have a bath, she said. So he made his way straight to the bathroom. As he went to get undressed, he saw himself in the mirror and realized he looked like he'd just been swimming. He was so sweaty. Tch! He grabbed a towel and wiped his face. But as he pulled the towel away from his face, something soft and flesh-colored fell like strings. What the? He immediately looked at the mirror and saw it was his own face melting. There was a whistling sound again, and as he tried to hold his face up, the edge of his hand started to melt as well. Help me! Someone! He tried to scream, but no voice came out. and the sight of his own face falling apart was horrifying and creepy. His tears mixed in like mud, and then he melted away entirely. The next day, they found his corpse in front of the school gate looking perfectly normal and not melted, but his face looked like he'd seen something terrifying. What actually happened? I don't know, but according to his family, he never came home from school that day. Maybe everything he saw was just a dream. But even so, I wonder why he died. The rumors said it was a heart attack from fear. And then his family moved to the next town over. Pink-san still hangs around our school, even now. And that's the story of Pink-san. Is there another of the 7 mysteries that you'd like to hear? Yes. Okay, which would you like to hear? The evil monster that lives in Tsukikomori. Mononoke-sama, huh? Big sis Yoko, have you ever heard of Tsukikomori? I haven't. Didn't I take you with me? We went to the mountains, and on the way there's a little side path. I feel like I went there with you when I was just a kid. You're just imagining it. I wonder. Well, anyway, they say that long ago, a flesh-eating oni by the name of Mononoke-sama lived there. This oni only targeted young women, so the troubled villagers brought a samurai from town back with them. The samurai and the oni fought, and the samurai won. Then peace returned to that area. Don't look at me like I'm stupid. That story really does remain today. Everyone knows about it. So anyway, there was someone who thought it sounded really interesting. A cute elementary school girl with braids, and she intended to research it for her summer assignment. She went to Tsukikomori alone, but it's a pretty dense forest where not much sunlight breaks through. A damp smell pierced her nostrils, and with each step she took, her shoes sank into the soft ground, making her feel more and more anxious. Those sorts of places are always full of moss and mulch, right? And it's full of bugs like rhinoceros and stag beetles. Well, anyway, that's not important. The girl kept walking for a while, and then she found Mononoke-sama's burial mound. The surface was old and crumbling, and there was something written there she could no longer read, so she ran her fingers along it. Then it was like a shock ran through her. Unconsciously, she tried to pull her hand back with a scream, but then she heard a voice. "Don't take your hand off it." Eh? The girl was so surprised that she froze. Then she heard the voice again. "I'd like you to stay there and listen to me. I don't suppose you could pour some water on that mound for me?" She realized the voice wasn't by her ear, but rather right inside her head. So then, was the mound speaking to her? But the mound was dedicated to Mononoke-sama. Did Mononoke-sama understand human speech? The voice talking to her didn't sound like it came from a monster, though. Big sis Yoko, if it were you, would you listen to the voice? They asked, so I'd hear them out. That girl did the same thing, although I think normal girls would probably scream and run the other way. She just happened to have her lunch and a water bottle on her, so she opened it and poured it over the mound. It splashed and soaked the ground, and then the bottle was empty. Behind her, she heard a sound. When she turned, a mass of bones was pushing through the black earth. It groaned as it made its way towards her. Yeah! She was so surprised that she fell over. She clung to the burial mound and trembled as the skeleton continued straight for her. A dried up finger grabbed her long trembling hair. Then it drew close to her. She screamed, and then a bright light filled the area. The skeleton collapsed alongside a beastly scream, like it was falling back to the earth. Having lost its body, the skull rolled along the ground. Her mouth agape, the girl stared at the mound. The bright, almost blinding light was coming from it. And again, she heard that voice inside her head. You gave me water. This is why I helped you. Who are you? People call me Mononoke-sama. This time, she really was so surprised that she nearly fell over. Why did the monstrous Mononoke-sama get rid of the skeleton for her? Maybe he knew that was what she was thinking. That skeleton was the thing that ate me. The reason it hasn't yet passed on must be because it truly despises me that much. Or perhaps it has some lingering attachment to this world. Mononoke-sama's calm voice reverberated. But wait, Mononoke-sama was a monster that eats people, right? You gave me power, and now you should become my wife. Suddenly, a man appeared next to the mound. He wore strange clothes, like something out of the Heian period. He wavered like an illusion, and although he was close, she couldn't see his face clearly. Was that man Mononoke-sama? Come now, come. Suddenly, she drew near him like she was sleepwalking. Then he moved his arms, hiding her with his sleeves as he embraced her, and then... There was a sound like something breaking or tearing, and Mononoke-sama laughed deeply. The sleeves of his kimono were stained dark red. Phew. Let us go, my bride. He looked down, seemingly satisfied, and then disappeared. Apparently, the only thing left there was a large pool of blood, underneath which was only dirt. That dirt quickly sucked the blood up, and nothing was left. The girl went missing after that, and every year, a girl around elementary or junior high age is spirited away. Maybe Mononoke-sama gained strength because she gave him water that time. The year before last, it was the elementary school council president, and last year, it was someone from the class next door. You don't have to believe it, but don't laugh. The girls from last year and the year before that who laughed ended up disappearing. If you really don't believe it, then you should go to Tsukikomori yourself tomorrow. If you're lucky, you might find that skeleton and the burial mound. Or maybe you'll see the girls who got spirited away. I don't know what'll happen after that though. And that's the end of Mononoke-sama's story. Is there another of the 7 mysteries that you'd like to hear? Yes. Okay, which would you like to hear? The empty lot that drags you to the world of the dead. Alright, got it. So, the empty lot from this story. It's not like it's been around forever. There was a large house there before it was abandoned, and this house looked foreign, like a beautiful Western-style house. Big Sis Yoko, which style do you prefer? Western or Japanese? Western, I guess. Huh. Bold of you to say. Are you trying to start something with us? Anyway, this house was torn down in about 6 months. Seemed the owner went missing or something. Then it became an empty plot, and they put up a no entry sign. Anyway, everyone ignored that sign, and I often went to play there myself. And in the middle of this land, there was a giant hole. It was pretty deep. If you threw a rock in, you wouldn't even hear it hit the bottom, so we were pretty interested in it. One guy said we should explore it. No, not me. Don't look at me like that, Mum. It was Morio from the next class and some of his friends. And they clung to the diagonal walls as they went down. For a while, there was still sunlight, but before long, it got dark, perhaps thanks to the rough walls. So, they turned on a torch and kept going down, and they kept going for 10 or maybe 30 minutes. But still, they couldn't see the bottom, and as they started to feel anxious, they saw something move in the darkness. Shocked, they turned their lights towards it. It was something terribly skinny, with messy hair and moist scales. In its hands, it held a rat it was still eating, and its eyes with no eyelids turned to look at them. Morio and his friends screamed and ran. They heard a voice screeching behind them. Seemed it was chasing them. Dirt came loose under their feet, but even as they lost their balance and landed on their hands, they absolutely couldn't fall over. They didn't know what might happen if that thing caught up. Their faces and clothes covered in dirt, they kept running. I don't know for how long. Above them, they saw a light. They were saved. As they were flooded with relief, a thin, scaly arm reached out of the darkness behind them. With both hands, the creature grabbed one of their friends' heads and then dragged them back into the darkness. Suddenly, their screams disappeared, and a terrifying snapping sound echoed around them. Morio and the others fell over and crawled to the light. It didn't follow them again after that, perhaps because it was weak to the light. But what on earth was that hole, and the thing in it? I think it might have been hell, and the dead. But I've never heard anything about the dead having scales. Shortly after that, a bulldozer entered that empty lot and tried to fill the hole in. But no matter how much dirt they put in, it wouldn't fill up. And after that, none of my friends ever played there again. Nobody wanted to even go near it. After all, there was no guarantee that thing wouldn't come out of the hole as well. And that's the end of the empty lot that leads to the land of the dead. Is there another of the 7 mysteries that you'd like to hear? Yes. Okay, which would you like to hear? The demonic public toilet that eats souls. Okay, the toilet story. Toilets have all sorts of scary stories, don't they? After all, they're gloomy. You have to go there alone. And they're kinda depressing. When you go into that small room alone, you can't help but think of negative things. Like, if you look up, maybe you'll see a woman covered in blood looking back at you. Or maybe a cold hand will come slithering out of the toilet. Big Sis Yoko, did you see the toilets in front of the station on your way here? They also have a strange feeling about them. You have to go all the way around from the entrance, so you can't see in from the outside. Maybe that's why it feels like you're entering another world. And there's also a terrifying story related to those toilets. There was a boy by the name of Tonami in the next school district. He wasn't from our school. He was of average height, had average grades, an average face. He was just an average guy. On his way home from school, he stopped to play, but then his stomach started to hurt. It was already dark and there was a crescent moon in the sky. He needed to hurry home, but there was no way he'd make it in time. So he went to the toilets at the park in front of the station. When he got there, 2 of the 3 stalls had "out of order" on them. As he went to go in the only one left, a man came running in. He had light brown hair and seemed to be a high school student. He brushed past Tonami and ran into the one open stall. But Tonami couldn't hold it in much longer. He was in so much pain that he was about to fall over. So why? How mean! His head went blank, and as he broke out in a clammy sweat, the high school boy finally came out. He grinned at Tonami and stepped aside. "My bad. It's all yours." He wanted to complain, but Tonami ran into the stall. He really was at his wit's end, and once he'd done his business, it was like he immediately went from hell to heaven. When he sighed in relief, he saw some graffiti in front of him. Big Sis Yoko, what type of graffiti would make you the most curious? A poem written in lots of small characters. Ah, I get you. It makes you feel like you want to read it all, right? And there's often difficult words that you don't understand. You don't really know what it's trying to say, but it's still more interesting than anything you can read in a textbook. But Tonami didn't see anything like that. "Become nourishment for my beloved child," it said. He didn't really understand the word nourishment, but it creeped him out, so he rushed out of the stall. And then something fell on his shoulder. He looked, and it was wet, so he thought maybe it was some leaking rain. But when he touched it, it was sticky, like a web. "Ew! The hell is that?" he thought. But when he looked up, a spider with a woman's face was looking down at him. Her fat legs were covered in thin hairs, and she had a full, round, striped torso. Drool trickled from her mouth with fangs peeking out. Tonami screamed and ran from the stall, and he tripped on the dirty floor, but he had no time to care about that. "Ew, gross." See, that's why I don't like girls. This is not the time to be worried about something like that. Panicking, Tonami ran outside, but a white thread wrapped around his legs from behind. Wah! He fell right on his face. He turned to look behind him, and right there, he saw a wide open mouth. He held his breath and closed his eyes. He was going to die. But the spider woman didn't eat him. Tonami slowly opened his eyes. The spider woman's grinning face was right next to him, and he tried to get up, but he couldn't move. Huh? At some point, his entire body had been wrapped in white thread. The spider woman's eyes narrowed joyfully as she looked at the shocked Tonami, and then she turned around and approached him with her large rear. "What are you doing? Stop that!" He tried to scream, but then eggs the size of a fingernail tumbled out. A fishy, almost sweet smell filled the air. A sour taste welled from deep in his chest. But the eggs kept coming, and he couldn't even throw up. He was in so much pain that his eyes filled with tears, and eggs overflowed from his mouth. When he tried to breathe, he swallowed the eggs. Tonami's face turned purple, and his limbs spasmed. And then, terrified and in pain, his consciousness faded. The next day, they found his dead body in a horrifying state. It was like a skeleton covered in skin. No, this isn't a fable. Underneath his skin, there really was no fat or flesh or anything. It was like it had all been sucked out. Even his family didn't know it was him right away. He had changed so much after all. And that's the story of the demonic public toilet. Is there another of the 7 mysteries that you'd like to hear? Yes. Okay, which would you like to hear? The living skeleton. Ah, this is a story from the high school in the next town. In the science room of that school, there's an anatomical model of a skeleton. Apparently it was a special model, around 160 centimeters tall. Big sis Yoko, how tall do you think I am? Around 140 centimeters. Don't be stupid. I'm taller than that. Don't treat me like a little kid. Well, anyway, I'm just shy of 150 centimeters. So, this skeleton was a little taller than me. Pretty cool, right? There were rumors that it was a real skeleton that had belonged to a researcher from long ago. He was a weird guy, and he took great loving care of that skeleton. He polished it daily, waxed it, etc. Crazy, right? Maybe he was in love with it. Everyone around him had given up and no longer said anything about it. And he took advantage of that by doing whatever he liked. One morning, he went to say good morning to the skeleton like always. But when he saw its right leg, he froze in shock on the spot. The usual thin white bone now had soft flesh like a person. He tried touching it, and unlike a mannequin, it was cold but had elasticity. Was he shocked? Not at all. On the contrary, he was elated. My love got through, he thought. And he was filled with even more love, so he pressed his cheek to its leg. Apparently, it was pale and lifeless, like a dead body. When he looked at it again the next day, now it had both legs. The left leg also had flesh, and because they were slim, beautiful legs, they were likely those of a woman. The researcher was beyond happy, and he locked himself in his room, spending day and night with the specimen. Sometimes he fell asleep, and when he woke up, the specimen had another piece of flesh. After the legs was its arms, and then its torso. Bit by bit, it was turning into a human. The researcher was excited. After all, next would be its head. Apparently, he stayed awake the whole time for this one, wanting to see the moment it happened. He felt like this specimen was his soulmate, after all. Once its body was complete and could move, it would no doubt confess to him. And so he waited, unable to sleep. But that day, the head didn't appear. He was disappointed, but not discouraged, and he stayed awake the next night as well. But it's hard to stay awake for 2 nights in a row. Around dawn, he started to feel extremely drowsy, although he told himself he mustn't fall asleep. But his body wouldn't listen to him, and then finally he fell asleep, as though passing out. I don't know how much time passed. Sensing a strange presence, he suddenly woke up. He'd fallen asleep sitting in his chair. He turned around to look at the skeleton, but it looked the same as it did yesterday, the hollow eyes of the bone skull looking back at him. Disappointed, the researcher realized there was something on his lap. It was rather heavy and wet, and his pants were now cold and damp. What the? He looked down at his own legs. Blank eyes looked up at him from behind disheveled hair. The thing on his lap was a woman's head. Ah! Blood was still pouring from the cut, which meant that not much time had passed since it was cut. But why was there a head here? The researcher panicked and stood up, almost throwing the head. Bang! A knife covered in blood fell to the floor with the head. Why was that here? It was almost like he himself had... The eyes of the head on the floor moved to look at him. The purple lips then grinned. Before long, the police arrived. It seemed a serial killer had been working in the area who targeted only women. They wanted to ask the researcher if he knew anything about it. They found the researcher passed out, and body parts clumsily attached to the skeleton. That's right. The skeleton didn't grow any flesh. The researcher had been attacking women unawares to provide the skeleton. Looking closer, the right and left legs were vaguely different colours and lengths, meaning they came from different people. Now, that researcher is in a psychiatric ward somewhere. And they didn't get rid of the skeleton, but rather sold it to a school far away. The rumours say it was that high school in the next town. And that's the story of the living skeleton. So, Big Sis Yoko, you understand what happens now, right? That's all 7 mysteries finished. It's long been said that once you know all 7, something terrifying will happen. Don't you feel that way? I've been getting chills this whole time. Yoshio grinned. He was trying to scare me. He really was a little brat. But the moment I went to say something, suddenly everyone turned to look at me. Yasuaki-san, and Kazuko, and even Tetsuo. Even Yoshio froze as he stared at me. No, not me. Something behind me. A chill ran down my spine. What on earth was behind me?